Okay, good looking people. So yeah, we've just done some basic parenting, and now we want to get into some things which is kind of a little bit more complex. So I'm just going to show them off first, and then what we'll do is we'll dive into them. I'll just put this one in here. There we go, and I'll just put these guys in the other folder. So yeah, okay, cool. So let's take a look at this one here first. Let's turn that guy off. So basically, this is broken up into a bunch of different elements. I'm going to teach you guys how to make this one first. So the first one is based upon parenting, and then this one next is really based upon parenting and constraints. And one of the reasons why I've taken this approach with Blender is I'm trying to work out what is the simplest method to actually rig something and animate something actually in Blender without having to use armatures and constraints and weight painting and all this other stuff that you have to learn. What is the simplest way that we as 2D animators or 3D animators can actually make something move? And the only way really to do that is to get in there and actually build small little demo test rigs. So in this rig, it's basically comprised of 4 parts. This part here is acting as our root. So basically we can scale this rig, we can rotate this rig, we can pretty much do whatever we want to it from this position here. Everything from this position is basically a constraint. So we can see here on this control tab, basically what's happening here is that we're just moving this object around and the other 2 objects are pointing at it. And the setup on this is really simple. All of these objects, if we take a look at our constraints, our objects relationships here, we can see all of these objects here are actually all just parented to the root. So they're all free floating, right? That's the only constraint. We're just asking all of these objects to follow our little red donut circle root object. And then the way it works is where, because we know there's a thing in Blender called constraints, and this particular constraint, stretch to constraint, only works on the y-axis, which is really unfortunate because it really lends itself to a lot of trouble in Blender. Now, I just want to say that this constraint works really well with armatures, but when it comes to objects, you have to build this object or your rig in the y-axis. So basically from the top-down view. And because of that, this is not the best. Personally, I hate it, but I don't like the way they've developed this or designed this, but it's probably 20 years old. So besides the point, we have it and we can use it, and it is a good constraint, but the premise is you have to use it and build on the y-axis when you're in objects. So we will get to that. So you can see there the settings for the stretch to constraint. And all we're doing is we're saying to this constraint, hey man, I want you to look at this green object. And that's what it's doing, right? And then we have a couple of other settings in here. It'll actually give you the original length naturally. Everything else you can pretty much leave. The maintain volume XZ is basically to help give it that squash and stretch kind of feel. And the rotation ZX, you'll notice this is actually set to swing. And then if we do it on the purple one, you notice it will start to, if I can get it to do it, just switch this to none and we'll see if we can get it to yeah, you can see there it starts to flip out, and there you go. Now we've found the sweet spot. So that's what happens, right? So it starts to flip the object. So what we can do is we can set this to XZ, and then, oh, is it XZ? Yeah, I think that's how we had it. And then, yeah, basically the squash and stretch part of the constraint actually helps it to stop from flipping out. So if we do have the rotation set to swing, yeah, you can see it's gonna start rotating our object. But if we set it to ZX, we can see we get that nice squishy behavior. So there's a lot to remember with that. So initially, basically what we're doing is we're setting up our parent relationship. So 1, 2, 3 objects are parented to our root object, right? So we can see that in our relationships. We can see everyone is parented to the root. And then all we're doing is we're just adding these constraints. And the two constraints that we're really going to be using for doing any kind of cutout animation is going to be our stretch to constraint, our damp track constraint, and our, yeah, that's pretty much it. There may be occasions, oh no, it's a modifier. And then the two modifiers that we're really going to be looking at a lot is basically the curve modifier, and then there's another one, but I can't remember right now, so it'll come to me later. So basically, that's it. Parenting and having this behavior, right? And these objects. So basically, if we take a look at this and we look at our stretch to constraint, so this is our stretch to constraint turned off. We can see now all it's doing is that the object is always pointing at the green controller. So it's always pointing to it, okay? And so one of the reasons why we need to add that constraint is when we add the stretch to constraint to this object, what happens is that the object flips. Now you would like to think that there would be an option, or this constraint would be redesigned to not operate on the y-axis and to prevent the flipping from happening. Unfortunately, from any discussion that I've ever had with developers about this, that is never, ever going to happen, at least not that I'm aware of. So it is one of the most frustrating and annoying things when you're using this constraint, the fact that you have to add an extra constraint just so you can flip your object around. Now, if we were to, is there a reset on this? There's no reset option, okay. So if you are to reset your constraint, if you are to set up a damp track to constraints, if we put it on here like this, and then we tell it to look at our object, you can see here nothing's happened, right? And basically what you want to do is, if you just click and drag over these, you'll get, you'll find the axis that it's going to work for. You'll notice that its default axis is currently the Y. Even when I select the object, you can see it's still the Y. So we know that all we have to do is make it negative Y, and it's going to flip it. And that's kind of it. So I'm going to leave this one here, and then in the next one, oh sorry, before I do that, this is just like a more advanced version of this. So we're just going to dive in a little bit deeper each time, and so people can, yeah, you know, understand how to set up their own puppet control rigs. And it's, yeah, this stuff is really, really simple and really easy. You're gonna have to get your hands dirty and do it a few times, but basically you want to build everything from this top view. So when you're building everything out from this top view, that's when you're really going to see, you know, things start working together. And then once I'll just parent this one, Control P, and then once you've designed your rig in that top-down view, basically you can hit Control A, and you can say all transforms to deltas. And so if you ever are animating and you want to get everything back in its right position, you can just hit Control G. No, you can't. It's Alt G, and it's gonna send you back to your default pose and its default position. Okay, so yeah, you are gonna have to get your hands dirty, and the cool thing is once you learn how to do this, it's really gonna help you get a lot more flexibility and freedom in your animations. Things are gonna start to look a lot more fluid, and yeah, it's really fun to play with once you get the knack of it. Okay, and so it's just parenting objects to objects and just constraints. So in the next one, we'll start off with a really simple rig here, and then a couple of rigs demonstrations down the line. You'll see how this works, and you'll be able to start building out some really complex curve animation rigs. Okay, cool. See you in the next one.